Chapter 32. After these things, and this faithfulness, Sennacherib king of Assyria came and entered into Judah, and encamped against the fortified cities, thought to make a breach therein for himself. And when Hezekiah saw Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they helped him. So there was gathered much people together, and they stopped all the fountains and the brook that flowed through the midst of the land, saying, Why should the king of Assyria come and find much water? And he took courage, and built up all the wall that was broken down, and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without, and strengthened Millo in the city of David, and made weapons and shields in abundance. And he set captains of war over the people, and gathered them together to him in the broad place at the gate of the city, and spoke encouragingly to them, saying, Be strong and of good courage, be not afraid nor dismayed for the king of Assyria, nor for all the multitude that is with him, for there is a greater with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us, and to fight our battles. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah king of Judah. After this did Sennacherib king of Assyria send his servants to Jerusalem. Now he was before Lachish, and all his power with him, unto Hezekiah king of Judah, and to all Judah that were at Jerusalem, saying, Thus saith Sennacherib king of Assyria, Wherein do you trust, that you abide the siege in Jerusalem? Doth not Hezekiah persuade you to give you over to die by famine and by thirst, saying, The Lord our God will deliver us out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Hath not the same Hezekiah taken away his high places and his altars, and commanded Judah and Jerusalem, saying, You shall worship before one altar, and upon it shall you offer? Know you not what I and my fathers have done unto all the peoples of the lands? Were the gods of the nations of the lands in any wise able to deliver their land out of my hand? Who was there among all the gods of the nations, which my father utterly destroyed, that could deliver his people out of my hand, that your God should be able to deliver you out of my hand? Now therefore let not Hezekiah beguile you, nor persuade you after this manner, neither believe you him. For no God of any nation or any kingdom was able to deliver his people out of my hand, and out of the hand of my fathers. How much less shall your God deliver you out of my hand? And his servants spoke yet more against the Lord God, and against his servant Hezekiah. He wrote also a letter to taunt the Lord, the God of Israel, and to speak against him, saying, As the gods of the nations of the lands, which have not delivered their people out of my hand, so shall not the God of Hezekiah deliver his people out of my hand. And they cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language unto the people of Jerusalem that were on the wall, to terrify them and to affright them, that they might take the city. And they spoke of the God of Jerusalem as of the gods of the peoples of the earth, which are the works of men's hands. And Hezekiah the king, and Ishiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, prayed because of this, and cried to heaven. And the Lord sent an angel, who cut off all the mighty men of valor, and the leaders and the captains in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he was come into the house of his God, they that came forth of his own bowels slew him there with the sword. Thus the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib the king of Assyria, and from the hand of all, and guided them on every side. And many brought gifts unto the Lord to Jerusalem, and precious things to Hezekiah the king of Judah, so that he was exalted in the sight of all nations from thenceforth. And in those days Hezekiah was sick, even unto death. And he prayed unto the Lord, and he spoke unto him, and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah rendered not according to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore there was wrath upon him, and upon Judah and Jerusalem. Notwithstanding, Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord came not upon them in the days of Hezekiah. And Hezekiah had exceedingly much riches and honor, And he provided him treasures for silver and for gold and for precious stones and for spices and for shields and for all manner of goodly vessels, storehouses also for the increase of the corn and wine and oil, and stalls for all manner of beasts and flocks and of folds. Moreover, he provided him cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him very much substance. The same Hezekiah also stopped the upper spring of the waters of Gihon, and brought them straight down on the west side of the city of David. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. However, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, and he might know all that was in his heart. Now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his good deeds, behold, they are written in the vision of Ishiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Until Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the ascent of the sepulchres of the sons of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. All right, let's go back up to verse 1. We're going to continue now in the reign of Hezekiah, this period of time of Hezekiah, this one who God's strengthening and even showing even the strengths of God here. Hezekiah went through, and all the people, after they had finished the great celebration, finished all this, they went through and destroyed all the Asherim, all these Baalim, and all the pillars, and all these places of worship that were throughout the land that God said you shouldn't have. God commanded you shall not have. But you'll find that Hezekiah will restore just this one place that was to be worshipped at. And that was God's altar, see. There was no other altar there. But we'll find out they was making an example. There was an example being made here. And he told the people to return themselves to the law of God, and that's what they was doing, returning to the law of God, because they had went greatly astray in the generations prior to Hezekiah. And God was restoring. See, God had give Hezekiah a good heart to show. God has the ability to restore him. When Hezekiah set his heart to seek the Lord, Hezekiah was prospered by God. But we're going to go ahead and we'll pick it up here in verse 1. And after these things and this faithfulness, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came and entered into Judah and encamped against the fortified cities and thought to make a breach therein for himself. And Sennacherib is this king of Assyria. Assyria means this Asher. This was the place from before, even where Nineveh was. Assyria was that place where God had made an example of prior, and Sennacherib was the king of it. And Sennacherib is these sins that are multiplied by the lesser light, even by the moon. And he comes to Judah, and he encamps against the cities of Judah, these places that have a guard. And what he's thinking is to make a break in the city, to make a breach in the kingdom of Judah for himself, so that he can enter in. Verse 2. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, and he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, this place of peaceful teachings, Sennacherib, this lesser understanding that is going to multiply the sin. Hezekiah sees this, and we'll find out he's going to do everything he can to prevent it by the work of God. And Hezekiah is this one whom God strengthens. 3, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they helped him. So he takes counsel, so him and the princes, and they go outside the city, and they stop up the waters. And this was to stop the waters that were flowing in the land, so that when the king gets there, or the king of Assyria gets there, he's not going to find no water for his armies. 4, So there was gathered much people together, and they stopped all the fountains and the brook that flowed through the midst of the land, saying, Why should the king of Syria come and find much water? And these waters that waters represent understanding. This understanding even that flows, we'll find out, that stopped up, and this brook that flows through the land. And this is that a brook is a wadi, or a waters that flow down a gorge that runs through the midst of the land, because they didn't want the king of Assyria finding water when he came. 5. And he took courage and built up all the wall that was broken down, and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without, and strengthened Millo in the city of David, and made weapons and shields in abundance. So Zedekiah, he's going to fortify, and that's what he's doing. He takes courage and he builds up the wall that was broken down, and he raised it up to the towers, and this is the walls that was broken down, probably when they had came in to destroy the other kings that was before Hezekiah. And this, he rebuilds the wall and refortifies. The wall is, anytime a wall is a place of separation. And he raises it up to the towers, these places of watch, and another wall without. And he strengthened Millo. And this other wall on the outside is going to be, there's going to be a place between them, a passage that goes between these walls. And he strengthened Millo in the city of David. Millo is a rampart. It's a place of protection. It's a fortification for battle. It's in the city of David, and David is that beloved. And he made weapons and shields in abundance, and he prepares greatly for a battle. And he set captains of wars over the people, and he gathered them together to him in the broad place at the gate of the city, and spoke encouragingly to them, saying, so he gets these captains of war, all these people that are gathered together to him, and he brings them to the gate. And that's that place of judgment, even that broad place of the city. And that's that place widened, saying, 7, Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid nor dismayed for the king of Assyria, nor for all the multitude that is with him. For there is a greater with us than with him. And he says to all these captains, be strong, of good courage, because God is with us. And 8, with him, the king of Assyria, is an arm of flesh. But with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah, the king of Judah. And he tells them, God's with us, and with the king of Sennacherib is this arm of flesh. And this arm, it's going to represent strength. See these strengths, and these strengths are this army of men, and these armies of men are all that he has. But with us, see, is the Lord our God to help us. And all the people will find rested on these words of Hezekiah, this one whom God has strengthened. 9, And after this did Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, send his servants to Jerusalem. Now he was before Lachish and all his power with him, unto Hezekiah the king of Judah, and to all Judah that were at Jerusalem, saying, Now after this, after Hezekiah had fortified Jerusalem, Sennacherib, this one who multiplies the sin by the lesser light, he is the king of Assyria, and that is the Molech of that Asher, that step up, it's that step forward, it's progress, or that alternative altar. He sends his servants to Jerusalem, and those are those that serve him unto this place of peaceful teachings, unto Hezekiah, the king of Judah, and that's that one whom God has strengthened. He is the king of praisings, unto all Judah that were at Jerusalem. And he sends his servants, because, see, he was before Lachish, and Lachish is that place of invincibility, see, and all his powers were with him. But he sends his servants unto Jerusalem. 10. Thus saith Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, wherein do you trust that you abide the siege in Jerusalem? And we'll remember this is Rabshakeh. He is this one who Sennacherib has sent there. And he says, wherein do you trust that you abide the siege in Jerusalem? Where do you trust is going to be this grace question. 11, doth not Hezekiah persuade you to give you over to die by famine and by thirst, saying the Lord our God will deliver us out of the hand of the king of Assyria? And he wants to know, isn't it Hezekiah persuaded you? Is he not giving you over to die by famine and thirst? They didn't know that they had water coming in the city, but the food was going to be the big thing. Uh, Saying that God will deliver us. God's going to deliver us from this king of Assyria. And we'll find out God was doing a mighty work using this. As an example even, 12, hath not the same Hezekiah taken away his high place and his altars, and commanded Judah and Jerusalem, saying, you shall worship before one altar, and upon it shall you offer? Has not this same Hezekiah, this one whom God has strengthened, taken away his high places and his altars, and commanded Judah and Jerusalem? And these high places and his altars, because the Rav Shaka don't know who God is or have any understanding. All his understanding is wrapped up by the knowledge of men. He thinks that Hezekiah, by taking down all these high places, has destroyed God. And we'll find out Hezekiah did take down all these high places. The people had destroyed them, because Hezekiah had proclaimed that you shall worship before one altar, as was the commandment of God according to the law of Moses. 13. Know you not what I and my fathers have done unto all the peoples of the lands? Were the gods of the nations of the lands in any wise able to deliver their land out of my hand? And because the king of Assyria and his fathers, the generations before, had gone through the land and destroyed it, and he was taking over all the nations abound. And this was an example. God was using them to destroy the wickedness. God using them as judgment, and God has brought it right up unto Jerusalem. 14. Who was there among all the gods of those nations, which my fathers utterly destroyed, that could deliver his people out of my hand? That your God should be able to deliver you out of my hand. He says, who was there among all of the gods of those nations, which my fathers utterly destroyed? These were those that worshipped these not gods, which God had given them to do, making an example from the beginning, because they had already turned from God. They had already forsaken the covenant of God. They had already set up their Molech. That your God should be able to deliver you out of my hand. And we'll find out God making a great example here. God making a great example here by a promise that he made. 15. Now therefore let not Hezekiah beguile you, nor persuade you after this manner, neither believe you him. For no God of any nation or any kingdom was able to deliver his people out of my hand, and out of the hand of my fathers. How much less shall your God deliver you out of my hand? Don't let Hezekiah trick you. Don't let Hezekiah fool you. Well, there's no God was able to deliver any kingdom out of the hand of the king of Assyria. And we'll find out. See, that's just not going to be the truth. God's making a great example here, see, because out of the hand of the mighty, God can deliver. And that is the example. See, out of the hand of even the mighty, God can deliver. 16. And his servants spoke yet more against the Lord God, and against his servant Hezekiah. And his servants, Rabshakeh and the bunch, they kept speaking against God. They kept taunting God, making fun of God, like we'll find out. And against his servant Hezekiah, against this one who serves God, who listens to God, who works for God, who God strengthens. 17. And he wrote also a letter to taunt the Lord, the God of Israel, to speak against him, saying, as the gods of the nations of the lands which have delivered their people out of my hand, so shall not the God of Hezekiah deliver his people out of my hand. And this king of Assyria, this king of the Asher, this king of the alternative altar, I call it, he wrote also this letter to taunt the Lord, the God of Israel. He just trying to make Hezekiah mad and scared. As the gods of the nations of the land, which have not delivered their people out of my hand, or out of my works, he's saying. See, this God of Ezekiel can't deliver his people out of my works. And we'll find out God can deliver. God, once again, even out of the hand of the mighty. 18. And they cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language unto the people of Jerusalem that were on the wall, to terrify them, to affright them, that they might take the city. And this is what they did. And we'll remember Eliakim. He says, don't speak in this language, but speak in the Assyrian tongue, because we understand that. But Rabshakeh said, no, I'm sent to the people of this city, because he was trying to strike terror in them. Terror, see, fear, and to take away your understanding by fear. 19. And they spoke of the God of Jerusalem as of the gods of the peoples of the earth, which are the work of men's hands. See, and they spoke of God like he's the God of Jerusalem and the God of Israel, like he's a God of the people of the earth. See, these things that men have made, these understandings men have got, these things, these works that men do. See, God's not bound by these understandings or bound by these rules. God rules over all understanding. God rules over all knowledge. He's God of this place of peaceful teachings. And because, see, that's what God did. That was the work of God even in the beginning. See, that was the work of God there even in the beginning. But these gods of the peoples of the earth, these are those that God gave them to rule over them for their error. 20. And Ezekiel the king and Ishiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, prayed because of this and cried to heaven. Ezekiel, he is the king, and he's the one that God has strengthened. Ishiah the prophet, he's the son of Amoz. Ishiah, this one who is saved of God, the speaker, he is the one who come forth from the brave, the ones without the fear. He prayed because of this, because of what Rabshakeh was saying, these words that they had spoken against God, and he cried to heaven. He cries out in his understandings. And the Lord, 21, sent an angel who cut off all the mighty men of valor, and the leaders and the captains in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he was come into the house of his God, they that came forth of his own bowels slew him there with the sword. And we can remember this as that which was prophesied was going to happen by Isaiah, by Ishiah, this one who was saved by God. He said this was going to happen. And God sent an angel out who cut off all these men of war that was come to destroy the city, and the leaders and the captains in the camp of the king of Assyria, those that had come up for him, his servants. And he returns with shame of face to his own land. He goes back. See, God sent him packing. And we'll find out there, and when he was in the house of his God, this idol that he worshipped, where he had put his face, they came forth of his own bowels. His own sons slew him there. 22. Thus the Lord saved Ezekiel and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and from the hand of all that guided them on every side. God saved Ezekiel. The Lord saved Ezekiel. We'll find out this one who's strengthened by God. And the inhabitants of Jerusalem. These are all those of the city of peaceful teaching. See, God spared them because God has the ability. God can do this because God is the one who had sent Sennacherib as this punishment against the other nations. Sennacherib is that one who multiplies sin by the lesser light, or by that light that rules in darkness. 23. And many brought gifts unto the Lord, to Jerusalem, and precious things to Ezekiel, the king of Judah, so that he was exalted in the sight of all the nations from thenceforth. And many brought these gifts unto God, to Jerusalem. That's that place of peaceful teachings. God's been making an example of that place for a long time, guarding it, showing his work there, showing his great judgment, his wrath, his power. These precious things to Ezekiel. Ezekiel is that one God strengthens, is strengthened of God. He's the king of Judah. Those are praisings, so that he was exalted in sight of all the nations from then on. And he's exalted, he's lifted up, and we'll find out God did that. God does that. He causes that. See? And when it happens, we'll find out. 24, in those days Ezekiel was sick, even unto death. And he prayed unto the Lord, and he spoke unto him, and gave him a sign. And in those days, and even in those understandings, that Ezekiel was exalted, he was sick, even unto death. And it caused a sickness, and God was putting it on him. God was putting this disease on him, the sickness. We'll find out God's able to cure him. And God's able to restore. 25. But Ezekiel rendered not according to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore there was wrath upon him, and upon Judah and Jerusalem. But see, Ezekiel, he didn't render according to him the benefit that was done unto him. He didn't understand it was God who had prospered Ezekiel. It was God who had prospered him in everything that he was doing. For his heart was lifted up, and even his understanding was lifted up. He was the king, and everybody was giving him fame and notoriety and all this. And this has the tendency to swell one's understanding or puff one up. Therefore, there was wrath upon him, and God was making an example. God was making an example. 26, notwithstanding, Ezekiel humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord came not upon them in the days of Ezekiel. Notwithstanding, however, see, and we remember it's documented there in Kings, Ezekiel turns to the wall and weeps before the Lord, and before Ishiah could get out of there too far, God turns him around. Ezekiel had humbled himself for the pride of his heart, because of his understandings, that exalted himself in his own understanding, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. So the wrath of the Lord, see, came not upon them in the days of Ezekiel. And Ezekiel turned in his understanding unto God. And the wrath of God was turned in the days of, and even in the understandings of Ezekiel, we would find this one in God is strength to show the strength of God. 27. And Ezekiel had exceeding much riches and honor, and he provided him treasuries for silver and for gold and for precious stones and for spices and for shields and for all manner of goodly vessels. And Ezekiel had exceedingly much. God prospered him greatly, riches and honor. And he provided him treasures for silver and gold, these things that pass through the fire, and that which belongs to God, these treasuries of it, these storehouses of it, and for these precious stones, these stones that are precious, even the law, and for the spices, these that offer a pleasant odor, that's this prayers, and for shields, these covenants, and for all manner of goodly vessels, these things which contain. 28. Storehouses also for the increase of corn and wine and oil, stalls for all manner of beasts and flocks and folds. And we'll find out God was prospering greatly. These storehouses, these places where they lay up, and they for storage even, also for the increase of corn, and all this abundance that God was given in the land, this from the harvest, and this wine. See, in the oil, that which anoints, and this wine represents this understanding. It's perfect in when it's first comes from the harvest, but it has the ability to ferment. And these stalls for all manner of beasts and flocks and folds, and where he could keep these stalled up. And that's held, that's bound up, see, all these beasts and these flocks in the folds. 29. Moreover, he provided him cities and possessions of flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him very much substance. Moreover, he provided him for cities, these places of guard, and these possessions of flocks. This is these herds, even. These herds are the greater cattle. These flocks are the lesser cattle. These are the sheep, and the herds are the ox and the bullocks in the abundance. See, for God had given him very much substance. God blesses, God exalts, God is great. 30. The same Hezekiah also stopped the upper spring of the waters of Gihon and brought them straight down on the west side of the city of David. Hezekiah prospered in all his works. And this same Hezekiah, this is that same one we're talking about, this one who God has strengthened, the strengthening of God. He also stops up these upper springs. These upper springs, he stopped them off from the course they was upon and reroutes them, these springs. And these springs here, these water courses, I believe the King James might say, these springs are waters. These are just the waters, these, and of Gihon, and the Gihon is this bursting forth, these waters that burst forth, even this understanding that just comes forth. And they brought them straight down on the west side of the city of David. That west side is that place that's towards the descent of the sun and the going down of the sun, on that place that has a guard of the loved one. And that is that to bring those waters down on that side. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. 31. However, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. However, now, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, concerning these ones that come from Babylon to the house of Hezekiah, well, remember, which Hezekiah showed them everything. See, God left him to himself to try him. So the Spirit of God constantly watches over, see, and constantly watching over. And when God steps out, he watches to see what you would do, to try you, to see where your heart is. See, that he might know all that was in his heart, that he might know all that's in your understanding, to make sure your understanding is constantly before the Lord. 32. Now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his good deeds, behold, they are written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his good deeds, all these things that Hezekiah was done, and his good deeds, these examples God made. See, God showing his strength, the strengthening of God to Hezekiah. See, God has strengthened him. They are written in the visions of Isaiah the prophet, and written there, see, so that they can remain, that we can use them. These visions of Isaiah the prophet are these things that as Isaiah, this one who was saved, perceived them. He, the prophet, the speaker, he's the son of Amoz, and this one to come forth from the brave. They're written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel as well. And that's that book, that's that place where they write it down so that it stay. See, and we can use it for a witness, these kings of Judah and Israel. Judah, as those are praisings. Israel, those that contend with the mighty one. 33. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the ascent of sepulchres of the sons of David, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death. And Manasseh his son reigns in his stead. Hezekiah, the strengths of God, we're going to find out, sleeps with his fathers. His period, his time, his reign is over, and they bury him in the ascent of the sepulchres of the sons of David. The ascent, I believe King James Version says here, in the chiefest, but it's not. It's the going up of the sepulchres, these graves or these tombs, these places where the sons of David, these ones that come forth from David, they're buried there. David is that beloved. He is the one, the chosen one. All Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death. They did him honor. He was one of the good guys, see, and they bury him in the sepulchres instead of out in the field. They did him honor. And Manasseh, his son's going to reign in his stead. And Manasseh, those that cause to forget, are going to reign in his stead. And we're going to find out he's going to live up to his name. We're going to move forward. We're going to go to chapter 33. Turn and return.